Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Bridge. We have another episode and another new guest today by the name of Alan. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Hi.
How are you, Casper? You all good as well?
No, but that's not the point. As they say, the show must go on. No, it's just it's a Friday. I've been working this week.
Good.
Yeah, it's. But I'm sure that Alan will bring me out of my shell again, and I shan't stop speaking by the end of it. But for now, I'll be quiet and over to you because he's your guest, really.
We usually can't shut him up, so he'll perk up. So I know
you said that about me, actually.
Oh, no, well, that's a good thing as long as we can sit back and let you roll. Obviously, I'm only a small bit familiar with yourself because I met you on X, where I saw a nice post that you did, which we will get into, which was about this difference between revolution and evolution. It's one of the I mean, I'm a big believer in this, but I don't see many talking about it, so it stood out to me. So, and it's quite timely. I think it was Neil Oliver that sort of started this thing, talking about that we need a revolution. I thought, yeah, I get it that we need to do something, but maybe, as we might discuss, it's not necessarily the right way. But before we get deep into that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, Alan. I know you're originally from the UK, but you're now in Austria, isn't it?
I'm based in Austria. I've been living in Austria about 11 years, and I lived in Greece for 3 years before that, basically applying my trade as an English teacher abroad, as many do. Obviously I'm still very orientated towards how things are done in Britain, because that's kind of what I understand the most. And at the sort of level that we like to talk at, or the sort of things that we're interested in, the esoteric side of things, I'm much better able to express myself in the English speaking world. So here we are.
What took you to Austria?
Romantic interests. Yeah, my girlfriend's from around here, and so but funnily enough, I met her in Greece. And so I kind of ended up here because the work wasn't going so well about 10, 12 years ago in Greece, after the sort of financial collapse. So it just seemed greener pastures in all sorts of ways, really.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's good. And I noticed on your profile you had a website. I had a quick look. I mean, is that your main work, or is that a side track? Can you tell us a bit about that?
It's a relatively recent thing. By trade at the moment, I'm an examiner of English, and that's how I pay the bills. But I would like to branch into more sort of, shall we say, metaphysical subjects, and I would like to find a way of being able to earn a living or even supplement an income that way. And so I'm just feeling my way into it, really, at the moment. And that includes the idea of imagination workshops, because it does tie a little bit into what we were talking about just now with revolution and evolution, that I think that imagination is a very crucial concept and a very crucial aspect of this, which is often overlooked. And one of the reasons why we are, as a species or collectively, so easily manipulable. And so the website imagician.org is it's in its infancy, and I'm just feeling my way into possibilities there, whereby I can express myself and also hopefully inspire other people a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you been into this sort of thing for a long time then? Did you have an awakening moment? I mean, what
yeah, I would say so. I mean, even if you go back as far as the late 90s, just as when I finished university, I was working in a bookshop, Dylan's bookstore. They don't exist anymore, but I'm sure you remember them, you guys.
We're not that old, but we do them, yeah.
course.
And Woolworths. But there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was working in the late 90s in the mind, body, and spirit section of a Dylan's bookstore, and that's when I first started thumbing through some of the early David Icke books and things like that. You know, just the things which you first come across when you're interested in this sort of thing, and I was quite skeptical at first, and it didn't all, the whole non 3D side of things didn't totally sell me at the moment, but it definitely planted a few seeds, and those seeds never really went away. But what really kind of shattered my illusions as to the whole narrative that we get given by the mainstream media was while I was living in Greece in 2008. Because at that time, the economic collapse was happening, and the BBC were reporting that that all these locals. I was in Crete at the time, in Heraklion, and the BBC were reporting that the locals were smashing up their own shops and just painting them in a very bad light. But their fury was actually aimed at the banks, and I actually saw just around the corner from where I lived at the time. I saw like what do you call them? ATMs, cash machines, literally ripped out of the walls with people with crowbars and people's bare hands, and there's just bits of ATM on the anger was all directed at the banks, but they weren't really saying that on the news. They were saying that they were just sort of attacking small local businesses, and I was like, I'm on the ground, and I sent them an email to that effect. And they sent an email back saying, "Oh, really? We'd like to talk to you." But something told me, some inner intuition, I suppose, told me, you don't want to talk to these guys. So I just ignored the email, but I just carried on watching and carried on listening and realizing that what they were reporting was really just an agenda and a story that they wanted people back home to believe. And after that, I basically went full-blown conspiracy theorist, and I've been going down rabbit holes and back up rabbit holes and things like that ever since. And I've had to teach myself that the diver's home is not the deep sea in order to carry on functioning. But we're still here after about 14 years. So
yeah, even those crazy times, and who knows what's going on with financial stuff again. We shall wait and see whether they start ripping out ATMs here. So you never know. Yeah.
Well, they're not really into cash in Britain anymore. I was really shocked. Last year, I went to Britain again for the first time in about 4 years. And I was basically, post-pandemic. And I was absolutely shocked at how much people in Britain have bought this whole cashless society thing. Because in the German-speaking world, they really haven't. Pretty much everyone, so you'll probably be quite pleased to hear this, but it's nothing like the same thing at all. People are still using cash here most of the time. And I'm very grateful for that. But I was absolutely bowled over in Britain by how there's no even guarantee that they'll let you pay cash in some places. I couldn't believe it.
What is the sense there, seeing as you're over there? I mean, here we get a sense that there's a lot of people still asleep, just don't know really what's going on. Is it similar where you are?
Yeah, it is really. They just haven't bought into the cashless thing. I mean, I would say I've only got 1 foot in it. I wouldn't say I'm totally immersed in Austrian culture. I mean, my girlfriend's Austrian, and we do socialize a little bit there to some extent. But my ability to communicate at that, I mean, I can get by in German and everything. But if we're talking about, I would really struggle. Although I've tried to have conversations like this in German, and it wouldn't be very impressive at all. Not that this is impressive either, but I'm sure you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get on to what we came to talk about then. So, I mean, I think what I found interesting as well is just that whole concept was how you sort of explained why revolutions hadn't really worked, how it just ends up in the same space again. I think that was quite
and the thing is, everyone knows that. I wouldn't say everyone, but it seems that if you talk to people over a pint or just, like in passing, people will agree with you. Even people who aren't into this sort of stuff, they'll agree with you. They'll say, oh yeah, and they'll also agree with you that politicians are all corrupt and everything. But at the end of the day, they'll still go ahead and vote for them, and they'll still go ahead and cheer for the next revolution. It's like a loop. It's really quite bewildering, and yeah, that actually reminds me, because you said it was the whole Neil Oliver thing that started this. It was that basically which inspired me to write that X or Twitter thing as well, because I was just seeing everyone slavering their chops again over the whole revolution thing. And I mean, for years I've been one of these pedants, you know, for years on social media. Every time I see someone talk about revolution, I try and just prick that little thing, you know, and I'm probably quite annoying in that sense, and I've been told so as well. But yeah, and it was the Neil Oliver thing exactly, you know, and I know, you know, I've really been enjoying what he's been doing lately. And you know, at the end of the day, he's hardly going to listen to a little pipsqueak like me. But yeah, I just like to, you know, sort of drop these little I don't know, these little seeds, I suppose, and I don't really worry about it after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the. I guess there is this moment where people don't really know what to do, how to proceed. They're sort of stuck in this moment of we need to do something, but we don't really know what.
Oh, definitely, yeah, I get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and well, that's just it. I was going to say it's the whole. I do easily get distracted by my own thoughts, so you'll have to forgive me there. But that's right. I was talking about how when you talk to people, they'll tend to agree with you. Most people that, you know, you don't have to work very hard to convince people that revolutions are often co-opted. You know, I mean, they're at least, you know, nominally aware that. I mean, even if you look at popular culture, you know, I mean, look at the original punks of the 70s and look what punk became. Just as one example, you know, it kind of, you know, lost its teeth or whatever. And, you know, I mean, you might still like the music a little bit, that's fine, but it's a far cry. At best it seems to get diluted, doesn't it? And at worst, it turns into, I mean, you've only got to look, it's not that long ago when they had revolutions in Ukraine and you know, and then before that in the Soviet Union and in China and all this kind of stuff. You know, these were revolutions, and a lot of the people, they wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for a mass of very well-meaning ordinary people going along with them who just wanted something better for themselves and for their, you know, for their loved ones. And yeah, I get it. But that's what makes us such suckers, you know. You've got Orwell and Huxley. They're both Etonians. They you know, I mean, I don't imagine that they have quite the same curriculum in Eton as the rest of us plebs do. You know, I mean, I imagine they have courses like statecraft and things. I mean, I can't be sure, but they certainly seem to have a very good idea of what to expect in the future in their novels, didn't they, really?
Yeah. So where do you see like a way out of this? Because I see we've got people talking about revolutions, and then when I talk to people who are maybe just, they feel something isn't quite right, but they're in this, I suppose they're in this point where I was okay, but I feel small. What can I do? This one person. That's where I see there's maybe a few groups. You've got the ones who are a little bit further ahead of like, okay, well, let's get the pitchforks or whatever, and then you've got the other group bit behind that of like, well, I feel powerless. I want to do something, or I feel I should, but I don't know what. And then sometimes if you start getting into these other things like evolving out of away from it, you start talking into maybe frequencies and dimensions, you start losing people a bit. So yeah, I don't know how you feel about all that stuff.
Well, that's a little bit what this whole Imagician website is about, because yeah, I mean, I don't want to sort of, I don't see my role in any way as being, oh, this is how you do it and everything, because I've got my own ideas about how I would do it, but they're not going to work for other people, or, you know, it might work for a few other people. But at the end of the day, every time you're following someone, they're not really following their own path. So that's not I think my role, as I'm starting to see it, or as I'm starting to create it or imagine it, if you like, is just to remind people of how important and how much of a superpower the human imagination is and can be. And and that we don't use it because it's not really, I mean, obviously some people use it, you know, but the ones who do really well out of imagination, that they find themselves, if you want to earn a ton of money being a, you know, a writer or a filmmaker or a song, you know, like or a musician or something like that, the ones who write the mega books, they probably get co-opted like the revolutions. And you know, and look how powerful that is. They end up steering the entire narrative of the, you know, of the culture that they're in and beyond. And so going back to the whole idea of you know, where we see ourselves, I think we you know, in order to try and avoid just revolving the wheel of revolution over and over again and evolving beyond it, I think we've got to trust our own inner voices more, and even in some cases remind ourselves or that we have an inner voice, or reacquaint ourselves with our inner voice, because it's drowned out these days, isn't it, by social media. It's drowned out by you know, our attention being put elsewhere. It's just so much noise. Where's the room for imagination? Where's the room for saying, right, well, okay, I don't know what this, I can't wave any magic wand and make things better with regard to these awful things happening here, or we can mention any one of a number of awful things happening anywhere in the world. But really, we shouldn't actually lose too much sleep over it, in my opinion, because there's only so much, you know, it's like Jordan Peterson says, you know, you've got to keep your room, you've got to know how to tidy your room before you can start thinking about, you know, running the world or changing the world and things like that. And I'm a notoriously untidy person.
Yeah, I'm not
so
sure.
yeah, so I'm so really trying to stay on target here with what you're asking with regard to what we can do about it. So wow, where were we? What was I saying?
Well, I think it is that tricky point where, I mean, I found, and a lot of people get stuck in this of, you know, I have to wake other people up. We spend a lot of time in that phase, I guess, until we move out of the coming of some of the sort of realization.
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. So yeah, the people in your own, that, thanks. Yeah, you've reminded me. You know, that was great. The people in your own environment, you know, your own home, and then your own street. It's like I often say, with regard to one of the things that we can do is, you know, don't shop with anyone where you know, like where the person you're actually buying the goods off, if you can, you know, if the person you're actually exchanging money with or cards with or whatever has a boss who lives on an island somewhere in the Bahamas surrounded by razor wire and starving dogs, you know, because if you're not happy with what they're giving you, you can't knock on their door and do anything about it, can you? You know, but at the same time, you know, we're always being seduced to care about things which are way beyond our locum of control. Like I often have this thing in my own imagination where you have a news channel saying there's something really awful happening at a diametric opposite end of time at the other end of the universe. It's really, really terrible. Why isn't anyone doing anything about it? Why aren't you doing anything about it? You know, and I mean, that's a crass example at the other end of the scale, but that's kind of what happens to us a lot. We get, you know, we get constantly told, what are you going to do about something which is a little bit ambitious when it comes to, you know, what realistically we can do. That doesn't mean to say we should be complacent and not doing anything. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we should think about, you know, our own immediate environment and the people we have the power to communicate with first, and also, of course, ourselves, our own perception of things.
Yeah. I do think that's what I've found, is that I can only really not only just work on myself, but that actually also has value to the collective. It's the only thing I can really do. One, to not to maybe interrupt somebody else's journey, that they have lessons to learn, and you may be you might do more harm than good sometimes by interfering in that. So I sort of moved to, rather than waking people up, I just felt I try to get that spark inside them and just say, look, whatever it is, listen to that. I think that's an important part, not listen to me or the TV or the politicians, but can I help someone become self-empowered, regardless of what decisions they choose to make with that? I don't know how you feel about that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think faith might play a lot of this? I'm not saying faith in any specific dogma, but just faith in general, because at the end of the day, I suspect it's people who don't have much faith in the harmony of creation, who are always trying to control, to micromanage it, and even with the best of intentions. You know what they say, the road to hell, one of my favorite sayings, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, isn't it? And this is how people get led down a dark path. You could even argue that most of what we're facing today that really gets on our tits, if you don't mind saying so, is people, well-meaning people who have just been sold, this idea that things have to be this way. You have to be accept everyone for exactly who they want to be at any given moment, and you've got to be completely, you've got to deconstruct everything, because let's face it, it's only now that things are any good. Everything in the past is, what did people know, and what did nature even know?
I think Casper and I we have these deep conversations on the phone sometimes. And we whether we're talking about higher selves or higher beings and things, and that faith thing crops up a lot. And I think for me, I struggle with certainly some of these religious concepts, but I think for me, it's having that faith inside in me that I will be able to cope with situations and things. That's how I operate mostly. I don't know, it's different for everybody else.
Yeah, that's definitely important. Without that, I suppose people would be liable to despair without that. But also, in my own case, it's that, but it's also I have a faith in just how reality or creation is constructed. There is harmony there, just because we don't see it so much these days in the human sphere. You can see it out in nature, can't you? A lot of people are saying, you've got to get out in nature, you've got to reground yourself, and there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there? Because you can see, the harmony that's there, and it evolved. It evolved. The expression for this I like to call divine emergence, which is that there's something. I think it's similar to the yin and yang, where you've got the little white spot in the ocean of blackness and the little black spot in the ocean of whiteness. There is something that emerges, the uncaused cause, which is the reason why we're all here. And you can call it what you like. You can call it the Big Bang, you can call it God, or whatever. But there is. It's very hard to disagree with the logical notion that non-being begets being. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because once you were not, and now you are. Once the universe was not, and now it is. Or even if the universe. Sorry, please. Yeah.
No, you're straying into territory that I enjoy, so I can't help but get involved. I like the sort of Taoist notion of, generally Taoists are ultimately fairly optimistic fellows, and I tend to agree with. Let's say that all of this stuff, on whatever level, has any sort of rhyme or reason. I'm not saying it does, but let's presuppose for a moment that it actually does. To whom, I don't know, but anyway, then given that it is so magnificent, really, what we're dealing with, where we're dealing with this microcosm of the human expression at the moment, is really just, it's nothing really. That's sort of quite, in the scheme of things. Yeah. It's harsh, isn't it, to say that? But it's just a tiny thing, a tiny blip in the universe as such, or the many universes, or whatever. But if you just set that blip to one side for a moment, just everything else that's actually going on and happening and unfolding, or appears to be, is rather wonderful. So there's a lot to be said for that optimism on a grander scale. And I quite like, you spoke about grounding, which is probably the inverse of this, which is, to come down to that singular point. and to feel more grounded in nature and whatever, rather than that massive expression of "you are the all that is." But there's
Well, they
those
do
marriage
say
of
though that
those two is nice.
you need the roots in order to reach the heavens. They do say
Well,
that,
exactly.
don't
Yeah.
they?
The whole sort of coming back to your whole thing about magic, as above, so below, and all of these, the traditional sense around what magic fundamentally is, and even things like the tree, not just being the tree, but the tree of life, and then of course you've got in the Kabbalistic traditions, you've got, of course, the tree there as well, this sort of schemata maybe for the psyche and whatever. There are just so many other things actually operating, that this thing about our point of attention always going to something to change and tweak these infinitesimally small things because they're so absolutely important, actually comes back to I liked that thing that you said about, there's something terrible happening the other side of the universe in a completely different time and whatever. And what the heck are you going to do about that? A lot of this is just about, we are actually incredibly powerful. And given that we're that powerful, of course, there is, it seems, a force working against that, or working to take that and use it. And I think finally, the last thing I'm going to say is it comes back to imagination, because these beings, or whatever this other force is or entities, they don't have that. They have all the other bits. They have many other things that give them quote unquote power, but they don't have the power of imagination, because true imagination seems to blossom from love. And without love, they can't have that, and they can never have it. They can only co-opt it and use it. So
that's beautifully put. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. That is why imagination is the superpower. And that is why I'm not really that worried about AI. I would be if I didn't have an imagination. But it's and another thing is, of course, I kind of see it. I have a model. It's not exactly like this, but I have a model whereby I see the reality that I experience, or maybe even the model that everyone else experiences. But who am I to decide that? The model that I experience is a little bit like a computer game in the sense that there's perhaps there's a finite number of permutations which I have access to in this particular body or in this particular incarnation. And everyone else with a human body has a similar potential of permutations, but they're going to experience it differently, because they're going to swiddle the joystick in a different way, and they're going to press the keys in a different way, and they're going to go down this hole instead of that hole, and they're going to tell you that this computer game isn't like that at all. It's not that, this isn't what I've been playing the same computer game as you for XYZ years and decades, and I've had a completely different experience, so you don't know what you're talking about, and all this kind of thing.
I think Gary's very close to that thing about frequency, and that sort of touches on that area of sort of tuning out and tuning in, that you could be geographically very close to other people, and even in your own family, right, even in your own household, and be actually living a very different experience of what life is.
Heaven and hell can be just around the corner.
And it's perception as well, when we're talking of this evolving, the way we can look at different things. The same, I was talking to someone online about this, where they still had this sort of anger towards the people that they saw going along with things, and and they're like, they still had that anger. And I said, I get that, I've been there.
Oh yeah.
I said, so I sort of said, well, lower perspective me is that I get angry and I think, oh my god, idiots, But I said, from a higher perspective, they helped me evolve. Without that friction, I would have just been plodding along still. It helped me evolve, so I'm thankful.
It's grist to the millstone, isn't it? All this evil. It's a real pain in the arse, and I don't really understand. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really understand why I'm experiencing it. It's like, I don't remember why, or because I do definitely. I do get memories and things of previous lives you know, flashing in and out, and sometimes in dreams. And
You
they
don't
have
remember this particular contract, Alan? Is that what you're saying?
No, yeah, basically that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't quite remember. I do dimly remember. I have an older brother, and I dimly remember a pre-life kind of discussion I had with him, which is quite interesting. And where we were discussing who would, you know, go first, and you know, but you know, I mean, the details escape me. It's one of these memories that's been with me all my life, you know. But,
that's rather lovely. Maybe we can touch on these sorts of things and go into the more esoteric areas on another chat. I know that time's often against us. Gary, I can't see a clock, so you'll have to see it.
We're down to 3 minutes, so
Okay.
it's a good time a good point to
well,
wind
just
up.
to say, Alan, I know I didn't know you at all before this. I know Gary somewhat. There were some exchanges, but I found that a really lovely conversation, and certainly from my perspective, be nice to talk to you again. I'm keen also to see how the website and what you do beyond your day job sort of expands out. And anything we can do, obviously, we'll put any information in the show more section for the recording. But anything we can do further to help support that, or when things take shape and you want to talk about them, you know, from my perspective, please feel free to come back.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate that very much. I've really enjoyed it as well. I was a little bit nervous, and you know, at first when you want to sort of, there's so much you want to say, and I find it hard to focus, but maybe the focus will be a bit better next time.
Yeah, no, I thought it was good in that sense, because what we're really about is, Gary talks about that a lot, about frequency, and what we could really tell is that you do have a message, you do want to talk about it. The fact whether it's absolutely laser-like coherent to begin with, I think that's not as important as the fact it's coming from a good place. So I think you did very well, actually.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming, Alan. We hope to see you again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, all the best.
Take care, everyone.
Until next time.
Have a great weekend.
And you.